Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools and much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for all things sustainable procurement. I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company, and I'm very pleased to welcome today a colleague, Cathryn Greville from Action Sustainability. Cathryn, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Great to be here.
Okay, so Cathryn, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became involved in the program that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a sustainability, social impact and EDI professional. In terms of my current role, I currently head up fairness, inclusion and respect at Action Sustainability. I think your listeners will be aware that Action Sustainability provides sustainability education through the Supply Chain Sustainability School. We work with businesses directly through our sustainability consultancy, and we provide performance measurement tools through our sustainability tool. So perhaps the best way of explaining my role is that I work at the intersection of people, planet and purpose. So fairness, inclusion, respect as a program focuses on organisational and sector-wide behavioural and cultural change. So we're trying to positively impact sustainability outcomes, particularly in the built environment sector. And we do that by helping businesses and their supply chains to work collaboratively together to drive positive change. So that is for their people, for their business, and also for the broader communities that they serve. So in terms of my background, you could say I've had a bit of an unusual journey into sustainability. Before joining Action Sustainability, I worked across different areas of ESG in professional services, in the built environment sector itself, and within government regulators, including the building and energy and water regulators in Western Australia, where I'm from. So I'm actually a lawyer and a court advocate by professional training. Most recently, before this role, I was employed as in-house legal counsel. And I also have a degree in international relations, political science and language. So I've always been interested in civil and human rights, in corporate accountability and in global culture more broadly. And I think that's really the link for me with this area. I love that my role and what we do captures my passion for bringing people together, driving that positive change around fairness, inclusion, respect, or FIR as we call it for short, and also supporting sustainable and responsible business practices. So in terms of the built environment sector, I think there are not too many sectors that have a bigger impact on people than the built environment itself, where people live, work and play. So it's really great to be driving this in a sector where we can really make a difference.
Okay, thanks, Cathryn. That's quite a journey to where you got to today. So tell us about this whole people and fur thing, because it always frustrates me that I saw a presentation in Ireland, and I must admit I've stolen the line. Ask the audience what colour is sustainability, and they'll always say green, because people kind of see it as primarily about environmental issues. Where does what you do come into the sustainability agenda?
Yeah, great question. They certainly do. Look, the issues of sustainability and people, whether you call it fairness, inclusion, respect, or FIR, or EDI, equity, diversity and inclusion, they're inextricably linked. So sustainability includes, but it's not limited to, environmental sustainability. And I think many people, when they talk about sustainability, what they're thinking about is that environmental aspect. And we see that when we have people advertising jobs, or when they're talking about green jobs and green skills and so on. But at its basic level, how we live today impacts future generations. So sustainability is a social goal, actually, for people to coexist on Earth over a long time. So that has environmental, economic and social dimensions. And of course, those dimensions cross global, national and individual realms. So when I explain it, I always say it's the E, the S and the G in ESG. So I think there's probably three key ways where or people and environmental sustainability actually intersect. Firstly, at the business level, when we're talking about people and culture and innovation, there's huge benefits of a commitment to having a fair, inclusive and respectful environment. Secondly, at a societal level, that incorporates climate justice, incorporates human rights. Those who stand to be the most impacted by climate change, both now and in the future, really are our marginalised and minoritised communities. And then I think there's a third dimension, which is at that solutions level. And this is where the technical side of environmental sustainability comes into play. So we're talking about key solutions to the climate crisis, and actually many of them lie in achieving equality. So perhaps I can expand on that a little bit to describe what I mean. When we're talking at business level, Sean, I explained that, look, there's certainly a people and talent component here. So we're talking, when we talk about people, attracting, recruiting, supporting, developing, retaining people. Because, of course, people and their behaviour and the culture that sets really makes or breaks businesses. And ensuring we have the right people with the right skills to actually deliver sustainable environments fit for the future is a really critical component of addressing the climate crisis. So I always say we need diverse and innovative thinkers who actually look at the world differently to enable us to move forward from our current way of operating. So if we have the same sorts of people in the same sorts of roles doing things the same way that got us into this mess, we're actually not going to be able to get ourselves out of it. And I think what I find really exciting here is the younger generation actually recognise this. So 83% of Gen Z candidates actually rate commitment to diversity and inclusion as important in terms of their job search and where they would work. And 56% would hesitate to accept a job in an organisation that doesn't have diverse representation in its senior leadership. So not only is it a good thing from a business perspective, but it's also a really good thing from a people and a talent attraction, retention perspective as well. And of course, we'd really love businesses to come to this from the moral side, and I guess the good things about it from that aspect and the equity aspect. But we know many businesses don't operate on that basis, and leaders are accountable for financial returns. We understand that they're accountable to their shareholders. So we really do need that business case, that what's in it for them. And the great thing about this is, from a leadership and accountability perspective, the business case is strong. Actually, it's strong from many perspectives. But if we look at leadership and accountability, for example, there's this really strong correlation between fair, inclusive, and respectful behaviours and accountability of an organisation. I've certainly seen that in my career in legal advisory work, and also in prosecuting regulatory breaches. Poor leadership and accountability really breeds poor outcomes. And then we've got that productivity and operational efficiency perspective, which really comes into play in the built environment sector. And diversity and inclusion is actually linked to faster decision making and better team cooperation. So companies that are gender and ethnically diverse, for example, outperform their peers. There's some great studies around this. We know that, for example, companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are actually 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective competitors. And then a recent study found that companies with more gender balanced workforces actually consistently outperform less diverse peers over that's looked at the past decade, and they looked at returns of up to 2% higher annually. So firms that actually exhibit greater gender parity, especially in revenue and engineering type roles, which is very relevant to the built environment sector, actually saw the strongest results. So from a financial materiality point of view, this is important. We know, for example, organisations with inclusive cultures are 2 times as likely to meet or exceed their financial targets, something like 3 times more likely to be high performing, and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. And that's from a Deloitte report. So there's all these great opportunities for businesses here that really need to be recognised. And then there's the other aspects like health and safety. So fair, inclusive, respectful environments are really critical to meet business obligations around creating a safe workplace, including that psychological safety aspect. And more, we're actually seeing a commitment to people and to fair and inclusive environments actually being expected, and even with some clients, mandated by clients of their supply chains. So I think that's a really positive thing, in my opinion. If we look at societal level, we know that the fair and inclusive, respectful environments fall under several sustainable development goals. So your listeners would be aware of the 17 interlinked objectives around people and prosperity of the planet and the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And they include things like poverty eradication, health and well-being, gender equality, economic growth. There's reduced inequalities. There is sustainable cities and communities. And there's areas such as peace and justice and strong institutions. And people are central to all of these. In the UK, we know that inclusion is both a theme in the procurement policy that you would speak about, I'm sure, quite a lot, Sean, alongside the Social Value Act. So it's one of the themes, equal opportunity is one of the themes in our social value legislation. And it's actually an essential ingredient in all of the themes, because you can't achieve any of what's set out there unless you have people on board and you actually have people who are inspired to drive this with us. And that's where just transition comes in as well at this societal level, because that's really critical. And what I mean by just transition is we need to be making sure that as we strive to adopt a healthy and clean environment and economy, that we're not doing so at the expense of particular groups or particular communities. So that might be from a health perspective, environment perspective, obviously, but also in terms of jobs and the economic impact that has on people in particular communities. And there's that other element of we actually need the incredible knowledge and the wisdom of local communities. So we need to make sure that we're inclusive of those who'll be impacted, because those people are best placed to help us identify solutions and actually to implement them. And I think from a societal point of view, there's also another element, which is that human rights element. And this is really strong. So sustainability is a key human rights issue that's actually affecting people around the world right now. So we know something like 80% of people displaced by climate events are women and girls, for example. And in some extreme weather events, like cyclones that are becoming more prevalent with climate change, violence against women can actually increase a staggering 400%. So we see the different impacts that the climate crisis and weather events have on women and girls in particular. But of course, this extends across different characteristics as well. And then the final element, I guess, is that solutions level, Sean. And here I'm talking about solutions for the climate crisis. So if I continue talking about gender equity alone, if we look at the energy transition, for example, which obviously is key to decarbonisation, one solution that often comes to mind and certainly discussed in the built environment sector is solar power. And there's a big discussion around how modern slavery aspects of solar panels and the raw materials that are required to make them really impacts on human rights. And I know you've interviewed my colleague Helen Carter and my other colleague EJ Allen have done a great piece of work around this issue in particular. I highly recommend that to listeners. But you might actually be surprised to hear that when you compare over 100 solutions to global warming, as Project Drawdown did, and Project Drawdown is an NGO which tackles practical solutions to global warming, they actually found that educating girls and family planning actually rank higher than both rooftop solar and solar farms in terms of being the most powerful solutions to reducing carbon emissions. I mean, that's huge, isn't it? You know, that solution ranks not far behind tropical forests and plant-rich diets. So they predicted that by empowering women, you could actually prevent over something like 100 billion tonnes of emissions over a 30-year period. They looked at 2020 to 2050. And that's the equivalent of something like 722 million cars. So there's a link there between all our EV vehicles and what we're doing there and how we're trying to move that forward. And when we look at implementing solutions, we know that governance is actually one of the greatest opportunities in terms of gender equality and pushing forward the sustainability agenda. So there's this great report by ISOR, the International Strategic Accelerator for Women, and they produced a gender equality report focusing on accelerating ESG. And basically, they found that when you have women in senior executive and board positions with influence over key decisions and the systems of internal control and other governance activities, basically the more gender balance that exists in those roles at the top, the culture and the leadership behaviours that come from that will actually positively impact the decisions around the wider dimensions of ESG. So that's everything from setting up environmental standards, raising trust with shareholders, and of course all of that for businesses. It helps to not only help the bottom line, but give that corporate responsibility element and that corporate license to operate. And many people, when we talk about this, we talk about, for example, women in leadership roles and other groups in leadership. They say, well, but that's not a causal link, right? That's just a coincidence, or so to speak. But actually, that research has been backed up by causal data that comes out actually of my home state in Australia. So researchers at the Western Australian Bankwest Curtin Centre for Economics proved a causal link between more women in leadership and companies outperforming. So basically, the more women you have in leadership roles, the higher likelihood of a company outperforming other companies. And they actually found that was the case across 6 key profitability and performance metrics, everything from return on equity to EBIT, earnings before interest and tax, right through to return on assets and dividend yield and so on. So if we come back to the Sustainable Development Goals here, the focus has always been on people and planet. And I think there's a lot of focus around the technical elements. It's really easy to look at what the latest technical solutions are, the materials and so on, especially in a sector like the built environment sector and construction, where there's already an incredible amount of technical skill required to actually deliver the built environment. But we have to forget that people are such a critical element of that. They're not just a piece of the puzzle, but they're actually the glue that holds it together, so to speak. So, we really need to come back to the fact that people and the related behaviours and cultures that we create for them are a catalyst for achieving environmental sustainability and connect the two between each other.
That's amazing. Thanks, Cathryn, because, I always say, we talk about the planet, but the planet will take care of itself and eventually rid itself of the problem, i.e. the human race. So this whole idea that it is about people ultimately is quite fascinating. No, thank you very much for that. It's really useful perspective. When you talk about, you've given us a load of stats, and I'm sure our audience are going to lap it up. Do you see examples of this being done well? What sort of stories do you see of organisations that are adopting this level of thinking and actually succeeding as a result of it?
Yeah, look, there's lots of examples, and it depends. And these examples come right from, if we're talking about the built environment sector, right from client level and tier one builders and construction companies right through their supply chain. So there's huge benefits. If we look at, for example, the people element, there's 4 key reasons why we know businesses are really starting to see the benefit of this at ground level. And the first one, depending on what size business and what their challenges are, often talent and skills and attracting the right people and therefore getting the right skill set and ability to be innovative into the company is one of their key drivers. And we're seeing huge connection. I mentioned the stats earlier about younger people. The younger generation are going to make up the majority of our workplace, over the next 10 years. So that's really important in terms of upskilling people around what we call green skills, both bringing people in but also upskilling the existing workforce that we've got. It's really important. We're seeing it in terms of winning work. So companies are actually realising that unless they're serious about this, they're not going to win work. So we have some clients who are starting to mandate. So we work closely, for example, with National Highways. National Highways is requiring its supply chain to actually report into our diversity survey, which is an annual survey that tracks diversity metrics across a business. And in many ways, I think whilst there is a flurry of certifications available and that are intended to prove your commitment to EDI or fairness, inclusion, respect, the best way of proving that commitment and that journey you're on is actually being able to say, look, here was my baseline. I started reporting on this. We put in place initiatives that really, were targeting inclusion and targeting both the representation, but the retention of people from all different backgrounds and skill sets. And look, over the course of 3-5 years, however long it is, this is where we stand. So actually what we're doing is successful. So that tracking, that measurement, performance measurement aspect is really important for businesses to be able to see that what they're doing is actually targeting the right thing. So we have lots of small businesses that we deal with in the Fairness, Inclusion, Respect program. About 70% of the companies that we deal with are small or medium businesses. And many of them are starting to say, look, we didn't realise at the start, but actually this is having a massive impact on our business. So some of the stats around that, for example, we run an annual fur culture impact report, which gives us the pulse of fairness, inclusion, respect across the sector. And we know that overall it's actually impacting fundamental business performance when we have companies that are committed to workplace equity and inclusion. So 66% of the companies that do the FIR program, for example, actually tell us that it's improved their engagement with stakeholders. And 52% say that it's improved their productivity in their business. And another 52% say it actually helps them win new business. So that winning work aspect is really key. And then the other reasons that companies often engage in this area is time and cost. So there's a lot of cost, there's a lot of business risk around not doing this. There is a legislative framework, even though it's not as strong as we would like it to be. Obviously, we do have the Equalities Act in the UK and around the world we have similar legislation. So there is a requirement around anti-discrimination and making sure we're providing equal opportunity. But I guess the commercial imperative has gone a lot further than that legislation. And that legislation is many, many years old. So it sort of trails behind where companies are. But companies themselves are actually setting the bar here and requiring it of the people that they engage with. And what we'd like to see is more businesses being really, picky about who they do business with. Just like we know our workers who are coming into the sector are starting to choose based on how companies deal with people and what their commitment is, and whether that is how they're going to be treated as employees or what their obligations are from a societal level and what their human rights record is, for example, or whether that's actually how they're engaging with communities and how their stakeholder consultation processes run. So lots of great stuff happening. We'd like to see it more. Obviously, it's easy to get impatient in this area, Sean, because we'd really like this to be just part and parcel with how businesses do business. We have got a fair way to go on that, but there's some really positive outcomes, and we've got great case studies on the Supply Chain School's website about businesses that have implemented and really embedded fairness, inclusion, respect in their business and in their supply chain, and just the positive impact that's having to their work and how they're delivering it for the community.
Thanks very much, Cathryn. I'm sure our audience will be fascinated to hear what you've had to say about the broader benefits of the whole equalities and diversity and fairness, inclusion and respect agenda. This is part 1 of 2 of our interviews with Cathryn. So do listen to part 2 when we get into more detail in terms of performance measurement and how we can deliver these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.